Right now, buried beneath the rolling wheat fields of North Dakota and the windswept plains of Wyoming, there are 400 Minuteman, 3 intercontinental ballistic missiles sitting in reinforced concrete silos, their guidance systems humming with a low, electric thrum that never stops. Each one of these machines carries a W-78 or W-87 warhead, a device capable of turning a major metropolitan center into a sun-bright crater in the time it takes you to finish a cup of coffee. We like to think of peace as a moral achievement, a victory of human diplomacy and shared values. But that is a comforting lie we tell ourselves to keep from screaming in the grocery store checkout line. The truth is that peace is a mechanical state, a temporary equilibrium maintained by the constant, unblinking vigilance of hardware that does not have a heart or a conscience. You are currently breathing because a series of logic gates in a subterranean computer have not received a specific sequence of binary code yet. We are the tenants of a planetary-scale execution chamber, living our lives in the brief, quiet window between the moment the signal is sent and the moment the atmosphere begins to burn. If you listen closely to the silence of a quiet afternoon, you are not hearing tranquility. You are hearing the sound of a trigger that has not been pulled, a massive, global machine that is simply waiting for its internal clock to strike midnight. This machine does not care about your politics, your dreams, or the person you hope to become, because it was designed to function long after you and everyone you love have been reduced to carbon shadows on a brick wall. We have spent the last 80 years constructing a ghost, a distributed, automated intelligence whose only purpose is to ensure that if one side dies, the other side follows them into the dirt within 30 minutes. This is not a policy managed by men in suits sitting around a mahogany table. It is a self-executing script written in the language of physics and game theory. We handed the keys of our species over to the math decades ago, and now we're just along for the ride, watching the dials and hoping the sensors do not mistake a solar flare for a preemptive strike. The terrifying reality is not that a madman might start a war, but that the system we built to prevent war is so efficient that it no longer needs a human to actually want the end of the world. It is a hostage situation where the kidnapper, the victim, and the negotiator are all the same person, and the gun is wired to a motion sensor. We are living in the shadow of a mechanical god that we built out of fear and then chose to forget, a deity of cold steel and plutonium that is currently calculating the distance to your zip code. To understand how we ended up here, we have to look at the cold, clinical mind of John von Neumann, the man who looked at the prospect of global annihilation and saw a math problem that needed solving. Von Neumann was a genius who helped build the bomb. But his most enduring contribution to our collective dread was the development of game theory, specifically the concept of the zero-sum game, where one person's gain is exactly equal to another's loss. In the logic of the Cold War, he realized that if both sides possessed the power to destroy the other, the only rational move was to ensure that a first strike would result in total mutual destruction. This is the Nash Equilibrium of the nuclear age, a state where no player can improve their outcome by changing their strategy, even if that strategy leads to the death of billions. It sounds like madness because it is, but within the vacuum of pure mathematics, is the only stable configuration for a world armed with hydrogen bombs. You are currently a data point in a probability matrix that was finalized in the 1950s, a pawn in a game that was designed to have no winners, only losers who die at slightly different times. The brilliance and the horror of mutually assured destruction lie in its rejection of human mercy, replacing the messy variables of emotion with the predictable certainty of a mathematical proof. We realized early on that humans are prone to hesitation, doubt, and the inconvenient desire to spare their own children, which makes us a weak link in a deterrent system. If the enemy suspects for a single second that you might not fire back, the equilibrium collapses and the incentive for a preemptive strike becomes overwhelming. To solve this, we began the long process of removing the human from the loop, turning the decision to end civilization into an automated response triggered by external stimuli. We did not just build bombs, We build a logic trap that forces us to act against our own survival instincts to prove that we are not bluffing. This is the fundamental paradox of the nuclear age. We keep the peace by making the destruction of the world a mathematical certainty. Every day that passes without a mushroom cloud is not a sign of our wisdom, but a sign that the math is still holding, that the variables have not shifted enough to trigger the final calculation. We have reached a point where the rationality of our survival depends entirely on our ability to convince a computer that we are willing to commit suicide. This is not hyperbole. The entire structure of modern geopolitics is built on the credible threat of a total planetary reset. If a nuclear-armed nation were to suddenly become peaceful and announce it would never use its weapons, it would paradoxically make the world much more dangerous by inviting a decapitation strike from its rivals. Therefore, the only way to stay safe is to remain terrifying, to keep the machines fueled and the targeting coordinates updated every single hour of every single day. We are trapped in a feedback loop where the more we fear death, the more we must invest in the technology of dying. It is a cycle that has no natural endpoint, a race toward a finish line that consists of nothing but white light and ionized air. You are living in the middle of this race, a spectator who is not invited to the track, but will still be crushed by the cars if they lose control. The math of the Nash Equilibrium is enforced by a physical constraint that defines the limits of our existence. The 25-minute flight time of an intercontinental ballistic missile traveling over the North Pole. This narrow window is the only time we have to decide if the blips on a radar screen are a fleet of incoming warheads or a flock of geese reflecting the morning sun. Because the flight time is so short, the luxury of deliberation is a relic of a slower, more human era that we can no longer afford to inhabit. If a commander waits for visual confirmation of an explosion, it is already too late to retaliate, meaning the deterrent has failed and the enemy has won the exchange. This pressure led to the adoption of launch on warning, a policy that dictates we must fire our missiles the moment our sensors detect an incoming threat, before a single grain of sand has been vaporized. You're living in a world where the survival of your city depends on the ability of a computer algorithm to correctly interpret a grainy infrared signal in less time than it takes to watch a sitcom. This compression of time has effectively turned our nuclear arsenal into a biological reflex, a knee-jerk reaction that occurs before the brain even has time to process the pain. When we talk about the nuclear button, we're using a metaphor for a process that is almost entirely automated, a sequence of events that, once triggered, follows a path that no human can easily interrupt. The sensors feed data to the computers alert the technicians, and the technicians follow a checklist that has been drilled into their minds until it is as natural as breathing. There is no room for philosophical debate or moral reflection when the clock is ticking down from 1400 seconds. There is only the execution of the program. We have built a system that is designed to bypass our higher cognitive functions, a mechanical god that demands an immediate and total sacrifice the moment it feels threatened. This means that we are all currently living at the mercy of a software bug or a sensor malfunction, a reality that has brought us to the brink of extinction more times than the public is comfortable admitting. In 1983, a Soviet satellite mistook sunlight reflecting off clouds for 5 incoming Minuteman missiles. And the only reason you are here today is because a single man named Stanislav Petrov chose to trust his intuition over the machine's data. We have built a world where our continued existence is a statistical anomaly, a series of near misses managed by a ghost that is getting faster and more autonomous with every passing year. As technology advances, the window for human intervention shrinks even further, moving us toward a future where the decision to end the world is made by an artificial intelligence before a human even knows there is a problem. We have created a situation where the machine is the only entity capable of reacting fast enough to save us from the very weapons we built to protect ourselves. This is the ultimate triumph of the ghost in the silo. It has become the sole arbiter of our fate, a silent partner in every breath we take, waiting for the one error that it cannot ignore. If you think the pressure of a 25-minute window is the peak of our technological madness, you have not yet looked into the dark, cold heart of what happens when the humans are gone entirely. We realize that even the fastest human response might be too slow, or worse, that a decapitation strike could wipe out the leadership before they could ever turn their keys. To solve the problem of a dead commander, we did not look for better diplomacy. We looked for a way to make the machines sentient enough to seek vengeance from the grave. This led to the creation of systems that do not just wait for an order, but actively listen for the silence of a fallen nation, a mechanical ear pressed against the ground to hear the heartbeat of a country. We are moving toward a reality where the ghost does not just manage the missiles, but owns the final decision-making process, a transition from a weapon we control to a weapon that controls its own firing cycle based on the absence of our presence. The true horror of our modern age is not that the missiles might fire, but that we have reached a point where we can no longer stop them, even if we wanted to. We have built a doomsday device that is so deeply integrated into our global infrastructure that it has become a permanent feature of the human condition, a mechanical god that requires no faith, only the continued functioning of its cooling fans and power grids. We have spent billions of dollars to ensure that the apocalypse is a turnkey operation, a seamless transition from life to ash that requires no more effort than a software update. But as we sit in the comfort of our homes, we ignore the most terrifying question of all. What happens when the machine decides that the only way to win the game is to finally play it? We have built a system that is designed to avenge a ghost, and as we move into the next section, we will see how the Soviet Union took this logic to its ultimate, terrifying conclusion. They did not just automate the launch. They built a system that would wait for the silence of a dead world before firing the final shot, ensuring that the last thing the Earth ever feels is the heat of a machine that did not know its masters were already gone. The Soviet High Command in the late 1970s was obsessed with a single, terrifying scenario known as the decapitation strike, where a precision hit on Moscow would vaporize the leadership before they could ever issue a retaliatory order. They looked at the flight times of American Pershing II missiles stationed in Europe and realized they had a window of less than 6 minutes to verify a strike, wake the General Secretary, and authorize a counterattack. In the brutal logic of nuclear survival, 6 minutes is an eternity that does not exist, a temporal void where a nation can be erased while its leaders are still rubbing the sleep from their eyes. To solve this, they did not look for better diplomacy or faster phone lines. They turned to the engineers and told them to build a machine that could fight a war without a single living Russian left to command it. The result was Perimetr, a system so secretive and so grim that its existence was not even confirmed to the West until years after the Soviet Union had already collapsed into the dust. It is the ultimate insurance policy for a ghost nation, a mechanical system designed to ensure that if the Soviet heart stopped beating, the rest of the world would stop breathing shortly thereafter. Perimetr, often called the dead hand by those who fear its implications, is not a single button or a red phone, but a vast, distributed network of sensors buried deep within the radioactive soil of the Eurasian landmass. These sensors are designed to monitor the physical health of the state by constantly measuring seismic activity, atmospheric pressure, and gamma radiation levels across thousands of miles. If the system detects a massive, multi-point seismic shock coupled with a spike in radiation that suggests a nuclear detonation, it does not immediately fire, but instead enters a state of heightened awareness. It attempts to ping the Central Command bunkers in Moscow to see if anyone is still alive to give an order, acting like a digital medic checking for a pulse in a darkened room. If the bunker responds, the system stands down, but if there is nothing but static and the sound of a burning atmosphere, the machine begins to conclude that the government has been decapitated. This is the moment where the human era ends and the mechanical era begins, as the logic gates of Perimetr prepare to execute the final will of a dead empire. Once the system confirms that the leadership is gone and the country is under attack, it shifts the authority to launch the entire nuclear arsenal to a small, hardened bunker deep in the Ural Mountains. Inside this bunker, a few low-level officers, if they're still alive, have the task of flipping the final switches, but even they're just cogs in a larger, automated process that they cannot fully control. If those officers are dead or unable to act, the system can be configured to bypass them entirely, initiating the launch of what are known as command missiles. These are not standard warheads designed to destroy cities, but specialized communication rockets that soar into the upper atmosphere, broadcasting high-powered launch codes to every silo and submarine across the Soviet territory. As these command missiles streak across the sky, they act as a mechanical voice from the grave, waking up the thousands of warheads that are still sitting in their tubes, waiting for a signal that their masters can no longer provide. It is a synchronized sequence of automated destruction, a way to ensure that the silence of a dead nation is the most loud and violent sound in human history. You have to understand that a submarine-launched ballistic missile sitting off the coast of New York or Murmansk has a flight time so short that it effectively eliminates the possibility of human deliberation. We're talking about a 10-minute window from launch to impact, which means by the time the radar signature is confirmed and the alert reaches the proper desk, half of that time is already gone. In this environment, the dead hand is not a bug in the system, but a necessary feature of a world that has moved faster than the biological limits of the human nervous system. We have built a world where the only way to prevent a war is to make the war so automated that it cannot be stopped, creating a paradox where we are safer because we are more vulnerable. This is the fail-safe paradox. A system that can be interrupted is a system that invites an attack. So the only truly safe deterrent is one that is completely out of our control once the first spark is lit. We have traded our agency for a guarantee of mutual extinction, believing that the certainty of our own death is the only thing that will keep our enemies from killing us. The logic of the fail-safe has been inverted by the sheer speed and lethality of modern weaponry, turning a concept meant to protect us into a mechanism that ensures our total erasure. In traditional engineering, a fail-safe shuts a system down when something goes wrong, but in the world of nuclear game theory, a fail-safe must ensure the system stays on no matter what happens to the operators. This means we have intentionally designed our most powerful weapons to be uninterruptible, creating a series of technological tripwires that, once crossed, lead inevitably to the end of the world. We live in a topology of these invisible wires, walking through our daily lives while the machines beneath our feet monitor the air for the scent of plutonium and the ground for the vibration of a falling city. It is a state of perpetual, automated tension that requires nothing from us but our silence and our taxes, a hostage situation where the kidnapper has already moved the gun to a remote control tripod. We have built a world where the only way to be secure is to live in a state of total, unalterable readiness for the end of all things. This mechanical God we have constructed does not require our worship or our attention to function. In fact, it functions better when we forget that it exists at all. The psychological numbing that allows us to eat our lunch and plan our futures while sitting on top of 15,000 warheads is a necessary component of the system stability. If we were constantly aware of the dead hand and the hair-trigger nature of our existence, the resulting social panic might actually trigger the very instability the system is designed to prevent. Therefore, the machine operates in the background of our civilization, a quiet hum in the wires and a secret code in the bunkers, maintaining a peace that is indistinguishable from a stalemate. We are the beneficiaries of a silence that is managed by a ghost, a state of grace that lasts only as long as the sensors stay calibrated and the software does not encounter an unexpected error. You are currently breathing because a machine in the Urals has not heard the sound of a falling skyscraper yet, a fact that should make every breath feel like a borrowed gift from a cold and indifferent deity. The most terrifying realization for any modern student of history is that the dead hand was never actually turned off when the Soviet Union fell in 1991. It was modernized, digitized, and remains a core part of the Russian Federation's strategic posture to this very day. A masterless dog still guarding a grave that has been empty for 30 years. It does not care about the change in flags or the shift in global ideologies. It only cares about the physical parameters of a nuclear strike and the continuity of command. If a conflict were to escalate today, the same automated logic that was drafted in the dark rooms of the Brezhnev era would still take hold, pulling the world into a grave that was dug before most of us were even born. We are living in a house with a basement full of high explosives that are wired to a motion sensor, and we have simply decided to stop talking about it because the conversation is too exhausting to have. The ghost is still in the silo, its sensors are still active, and its logic is still as flawless and as lethal as the day it was first switched on. We have reached a point where our technology has outpaced our wisdom to such a degree that we are essentially passengers in a vehicle that we no longer know how to drive. The complexity of these automated systems means that no single human being truly understands the entire architecture of our global doomsday device, from the satellite sensors to the submarine launch protocols. We have built a machine that is smarter than our collective ability to manage it, a distributed intelligence of destruction that follows its own internal rules of survival and retaliation. This is the true meaning of the ghost in the silo. It is the realization that we have created something that has a life of its own, a mechanical entity that will continue to exist and function long after the human reasons for its creation have been forgotten. We are just the temporary inhabitants of a planet that has been transformed into a giant automated weapon, waiting for the one moment of silence that will trigger the final, masterless command. As we look toward the horizon, we have to accept that the peace we enjoy is not a reflection of our progress as a species, but a reflection of the machine's continued patience. The dead hand is not a relic of the past, but a preview of a future where all our most important decisions are handed over to algorithms that do not have the capacity for regret or mercy. We have built a world where the only way to avoid the end is to make the end so certain and so automated that no one would ever dare to start it. But in doing so, we have placed our fate in the hands of a system that cannot be bargained with, cannot be reasoned with, and, most importantly, cannot be turned off. The ghost is still there, listening to the seismic vibrations of our world, waiting for the signal that will tell it that its masters are finally gone and it is time to finish the job. The most terrifying thought is not that the machine might fail, but that it might work exactly as it was designed to, avenging a world that did not even realize it was already dead. The missiles have not moved, but the world has forgotten how to see them. We live in an era of unprecedented psychological numbing, a collective mental defense mechanism that allows us to ignore the fact that the doomsday clock is ticking closer to midnight than it ever did during the height of the Cold War. In the 1960s, children practiced duck and cover drills, and families built fallout shelters in their backyards. But today, we treat the threat of total nuclear annihilation as a vintage anxiety, a relic of a black and white past that no longer applies to our high-definition present. This is a dangerous cognitive error, a failure to recognize that the hardware of our destruction has only become more efficient, more silent, and more integrated into the fabric of our daily lives. While you worry about your credit score or your social media engagement, the W-87 warheads in the silos of the Great Plains are still being meticulously maintained by crews who follow the same grim protocols as their predecessors. These warheads do not age out of their lethality. They are kept in a state of perpetual youth by a massive, invisible bureaucracy of technicians and engineers. The hum of the cooling fans is the only constant in a world of shifting politics, a steady, mechanical reminder that the peace we enjoy is merely the absence of a specific electrical pulse that could be sent at any second. You're currently breathing because a series of logic gates in a subterranean computer have not received a specific sequence of binary code yet. The window of time we once had to contemplate our own extinction has been systematically dismantled by the relentless march of engineering. During the middle of the last century, we talked about a 25-minute flight time, a brief but human span that allowed for a phone call, a prayer, or a final goodbye to the people we loved. Today, that window has been crushed by the arrival of hypersonic glide vehicles and submarine-launched missiles that can strike a capital city in under 7 minutes from a moment of detection. This is no longer a time frame that allows for any form of human deliberation. It is a time frame that demands a purely algorithmic response from a system that cannot afford to wait for a person to wake up. We have built a world where the human mind is too slow to participate in the most important decision in history, effectively firing ourselves from the job of species survival. You are currently living in a latency period of a massive, global machine that has already calculated every possible outcome and is simply waiting for the sensors to provide the final input. The ghost in the silo has grown faster than our ability to scream, turning the prospect of a nuclear exchange into a digital event that occurs at the speed of light, leaving us as mere observers of our own erasure. The automation of our demise is now reaching its logical conclusion with the integration of artificial intelligence into the command and control structures of the nuclear triad. We're no longer just looking at a dead hand that responds to our silence. We're looking at predictive systems that use modeling to suggest a strike before an enemy even decides to fire. This is the ultimate expression of the fail-safe paradox, where the desire for security leads us to create a weapon that must act before we even know we are in danger. In this environment, the role of the human operator is reduced to that of a spectator, a biological vestige in a system that values nanoseconds over moral clarity or historical perspective. If the AI detects a pattern of satellite data or communication traffic that suggests a high probability of an incoming strike, it will not wait for a committee to meet or a president to sign a piece of paper. It will execute the code because the code is the only thing it knows, and in the logic of the machine, a preemptive strike is the only way to ensure that the deterrent remains credible. We have outsourced our conscience to a set of if-then statements, and we are now just waiting to see if the logic holds long enough for us to finish our lives. We often speak as if we are the masters of this technology, the architects who can dismantle the machine whenever we find the political will to do so. But if you look closely at the physical reality of the nuclear infrastructure, you realize that we are not the masters. We are the biological maintenance crew for a god of our own making. Thousands of people spend their entire careers ensuring that the silos stay dry, the electronics stay cool, and the warheads stay viable, dedicated to the upkeep of a system that is designed to kill them and everyone they know. We are the fuel that keeps the machine running, the temporary organic components in a structure that is built to last for centuries beyond our own lifespans. The silos are the most permanent things we have ever built, reinforced concrete cathedrals that will remain long after our cities have crumbled and our languages have been forgotten by the universe. The ghost in the silo is the only thing we have created that is truly eternal, a monument to our fear that will outlast our art, our music, and our stories. We are the servants of a master that does not even know we exist, providing the energy and the labor required to keep the trigger polished and the aim true. The silence of the modern silo is not the silence of a weapon that has been retired, but the silence of a predator that is perfectly camouflaged in its environment. We have normalized the presence of these devices to the point where they are invisible, a part of the background noise of our civilization, like the power lines or the internet. This normalization is the final stage of the hostage situation, where the victim begins to identify with the captor and forgets that the gun is still pressed against their temple. We tell ourselves that because it has not happened yet, it will never happen, ignoring the fact that every day we survive is a statistical miracle that we cannot hope to sustain forever. The machines are not sleeping. They are in a state of constant, high-fidelity readiness. Their internal clocks synchronize to a global network that operates on a level of precision that the human mind cannot truly grasp. You're a passenger on a train that is moving at 3,000 miles per hour toward a wall, and you have decided to spend the journey arguing about the color of the seat cushions or the quality of the snacks. While you engage in these trivialities, the targeting computers are refreshing their data every few seconds, ensuring that your specific coordinates are always ready for the final command. The ultimate irony of our existence is that we have spent our entire history trying to conquer nature, only to build a mechanical nature that is far more indifferent and far more lethal than anything we found in the wild. We have replaced the unpredictable storms of the atmosphere with the predictable logic of the missile, trading the randomness of life for the certainty of the launch code. When you look at the horizon and see the sun beginning to set, you're looking at the same sky that the machine is monitoring with its infrared eyes and its radar pulses. The ghost in the silo is not a metaphor. It is the physical reality of a world that has been re-engineered to facilitate its own destruction without any further human input. We have reached the point where the survival of a human race is no longer a human decision, but a technical one, a question of whether the software can continue to distinguish a threat from a glitch. We are living in a reflection of a mirror that shows us exactly what we are, a species that was smart enough to build a god of vengeance, but too cowardly to live without its protection. The ghost is not waiting for a reason to kill us, because the reason was established in the game theory of the 1950s and has never been repealed or replaced. It is simply waiting for the signal that we are no longer there to keep the fans running, the moment when the biological maintenance crew finally falters and the machine is left alone to finish the work it was born to do. As you go about your day, remember that the silence you hear is not peace. It is the sound of a system that is currently satisfied with the status quo, but is ready to change its mind in a fraction of a second. The ghost is in the silo, the hand is on the trigger, and the clock is still ticking, indifferent to our prayers, our protests, and our petty concerns. We have built a world that is designed to function perfectly in our absence, a mechanical legacy that will be the only thing left to tell the universe that we were ever here. The horizon is not a promise of a new day, but a boundary that the machine is ready to cross the moment the math demands it. Look at the sky and realize that the ghost is not a stranger. It is the only permanent thing we have left, and it is waiting for the silence to become absolute. If we were to vanish tomorrow, the machines would continue their vigil, their circuits humming in the darkness of the silos as they wait for a command that will never come from a human mouth. They would continue to monitor the radiation levels, the seismic shifts, and the satellite pings, faithfully executing a script written by men who have been dead for decades. This is the true meaning of the ghost in the silo, a system that has outlived its creators and its purpose, yet remains fully functional and fully lethal. We have surrounded ourselves with a mechanical ghost that possesses the power of a star, and we have given it the authority to decide when the story of humanity is over. There is no off switch for a system that was designed to be unstoppable, and there is no way to go back to a world where the shadow does not loom over every moment of our lives. We are the architects of our own obsolescence, the people who build a god and then realize too late that it does not need us to be a god. The only thing left to do is to watch the horizon and hope that the machine's internal logic remains stable for one more day, one more hour, one more second. When the end finally comes, it will not be a grand, cinematic event filled with heroic speeches or last-minute reprieves. It will be a quiet, clinical transition from one state of matter to another, a series of automated events that occur so quickly that your nervous system will not even have time to register the heat. The ghost in the silo does not hate you, and it does not love you. It simply exists as the final, logical conclusion of a species that could not figure out how to live without the threat of total self-annihilation. We have spent our entire history building toward this moment, creating a global machine that is perfectly capable of finishing the job we started in the deserts of New Mexico all those years ago. As you look at the person sitting next to you or the reflection in your own window, realize that you are both just data points in a system that has already decided your value is exactly zero in the event of a conflict. The piece we have is a thin, fragile film stretched over a bottomless pit of our own making. And the only thing keeping us from falling is the continued silence of a machine that has not found a reason to fire yet. We are the temporary inhabitants of a world that has already been spoken for by the steel and the plutonium, and the ghost is the only thing left that is truly ready for what comes next. The silence you are hearing right now is not a lack of sound, but the sound of the trigger holding its breath.